I did not know 670,000 others were,
Yes.
were killed as part of that movement. I learned something new every day. But this whole issue of those of us who stand by and allowed it to happen, I'm fascinated with that piece, because political movements are only political movements with political supporters who stand silent wherever we are, to the detriment of our country. And, you know, America and Western Europe was aware that this was going on, and many of them served as isolationists, if you will, for their country, and did not want to get involved. We ultimately got involved in World War II, but the terrific stories of, and not positive terrific stories, of the stories of escape, and those who did help our Jewish brothers and sisters in the 30s and 40s when this was going on. It's just devastating. If you have not visited the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., everyone should visit that. Black, yellow, brown, or white, you should visit it, right? My people were brought here in chains and stuff, 400 years of oppression. There's not healthy to compare those two. That's not why I raise it. I raise it to support what you're saying, is that we are still suffering from genocide and oppression from around this country, and my Jewish brothers and sisters are certainly under attack these days, as are other groups in this country. We simply are not unified. We all love America, but we're not unified about it. And the political rhetoric, and young people, and I'm into this now, young people don't know the story of the Holocaust. You know why? Because they don't get their news from main sources. They get their news from TikTok and social media and what have you. And then the loudest purveyors of misinformation are those who are ignorant and disinformed. And if our young people are disinformed or misinformed, they're following those loud voices on the far left and the far right, when most of America is right here where we are, in the middle, center left or center right. I believe you can be pro-Palestinian and pro-Israel without being pro-Hamas. I think it's dangerous for my colleague Larry, who's a fellow lawyer, and for my colleague Armstrong to paint the Israeli-Palestinian conflict or Hamas war with broad brushes. You cannot avoid, or you cannot disagree that the Palestinian people are suffering. They're being starved, they've been bombed out. There's no more Gaza, if you will. I get that part. And what Hamas did was fundamentally wrong on October 7th, and I will never support violence in any way, shape, or form. There are many Jewish groups and Jewish people who stand with the Palestinians and what they have suffered as a result of Hamas, not necessarily Israel, but they blame Israel because they've been bombed out of their homes. I think it's important to own and embrace those distinctions, if you will, and to say that the individual who shot the two people last night, that individual was mentally ill. One, he was pro-Hamas and pro-Palestine, and he ought to go to jail for that. But to label the protests and to label the protests at universities and what we've seen in the last couple of years as pro-Hamas protesters, that's just fundamentally unfair. Because you're right, there is a group with it that infiltrated that group that said those things, no doubt about it, and are pro-Hamas supporters. But I would argue with you that the majority of these supporters for Palestine are not supporters of Hamas, because Hamas is responsible for a large part of their degradation that they're going through right now. Now, they blame Israel, if you will, for the bombings, but Hamas are hiding within the Palestinian people, causing this devastation. That is not, I completely own that part of it. But I think the discussion is far too complicated, and I hope we're not painting groups of people with broad brushes, because the war itself and the ongoing issues between Palestine or Palestinians and Israelis are far too complicated for that. But there's a better way to do it. Larry, for example, strategically, you and I litigate.
There's no other way to do it.
Watch
the
this.
United Nations is totally corrupt. They're infiltrated by Hamas.
You're talking about other stuff. I'm talking about strategically, not only bombing Hamas strategically bombing Gaza to get the cancer out. We agree on the cancer. And then secondly, I also think strategically, based on intelligence and other smaller forces, to get rid of Hamas, to go through those tunnels and to do their job. I am 100% behind that. But you cannot say the good have to go with the bad because Hamas is there, so we're going to completely level Gaza, displace hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, and now not going to let any food or oil or gas or electricity into Gaza because we don't have a ceasefire and because we're still fighting Hamas. There's nowhere for those people to go.
Well,
we talk about humanity and morality. We got to have some of that at the base and at the top of this debate. We have to.